welcome to Inside the Birds Pregame Live, presented by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. Can the Philadelphia Eagles get off to their second 4-0 start in 2 years? They'll have to beat one of the three teams last year that handed them a defeat in the regular season, those pesky NFC East rival Washington Commanders. I'm Geoff Mosher, alongside my co-host Adam Caplan. Joining us, as always, we've got former Eagles wide receiver. He's also the sideline radio voice of the University of Michigan, and they may have done something yesterday. Who knows? Jason Avant, what's going on, Jay? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Making the show all the way from Denver. Let's make this show a great one.
All right, we will definitely make the show the great one because we have you, and for our money, we've got the world's best tape analyst, Greg Cosell. Now, we don't have much money, Greg, but still, you are, for our money, the best breakdown guy that we can get. So welcome back to the show.
I'm really looking forward to this. You know, it's another football Sunday. There's very few 1 o'clock games this year, too. Isn't that correct?
Yep. It's crazy. We're all seeing each other here at 10 in the morning. This is our normal slot, but
right.
it will be abnormal for this season. Also, this is week 4. It's kind of like college, right? Jason, sideline. That's when all the big games begin in college, when the cupcakes are done. And now for the Eagles, it is their first NFC East game. And maybe the Eagles are a little revenge minded as they play host to a Commanders team that did come to the link last year and hand them a 32-21 loss just 7 weeks after the Eagles had beaten them in their house 24-8. But that's in the past now. The Eagles are coming off a 25-11 spanking of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football down at Raymond James Stadium. Now, the Commanders were looking all right at 2-0, but then they got absolutely pantsed last Sunday by the Buffalo Bills, losing 37-3 at home for their first loss of the year. I still want to focus on this whole Eagles-Washington thing. Jason, I'll start with you. I don't know what it is about Washington. But when I was a newspaper reporter, covering your team earlier in my career, we always had to do that Sunday predictions column and stats, and we had to do like we do on this show, but in print. I had to analyze all the matchups. And there were so many times I felt that the matchup said the Eagles were far and away the better team. And yet so many times at the end of the game, I was left scratching my head, either a loss or a close win or a game you thought was going to be 28-20 would wind up being 6-0. It was very weird games against Washington. Do you recall those games against Washington just being different than other division games?
You got to remember, this team studies and sees more games of the Eagles, the Cowboys, and Giants than any other team. And you're familiar with the scheme, what the mindset of the offensive coordinator, defense coordinator is. So yes, Washington's always played us tough. It's always been one of those teams that they bring their lunch pail. They've always been a gritty team. So it can go any way. Now, like I said, division opponents, like, you can throw records out. You can. Everyone, I know it's an old cliche that you say, but it's true. That's why you have, I said this, earlier in the week, that's how you have the Texans that go in and beat the Jaguars handily. And right. It just happens like that. I don't know why, but it happens like that. You see those formations, you see the plays over and over again, and you get a game plan for it. When a team is in the opposite division, they may get that team once a year or every other year. It's just totally different. We know what the other team is trying to do.
Yeah, here's how I've always viewed these NFC East rivalries is for the Eagles, it's Dallas is the team that the fans hate the most. But when you guys play, it was always it's generally a good game, normal game. The Giants were the team back in your day that was the toughest opponent for you guys. Dallas wasn't as very good. Washington was always the team that you guys fist fought. Like, whether it's at the center and Deshaun going at it with D'Angelo Hall, and then the Chris Baker and Jason Peters, there was always a muck it up element against Washington that I don't remember seeing as much against Dallas and New York. So that always made the game kind of fascinating to me and very hard to predict. And you're right. Obviously, all the teams study each other twice a year, and they figure out different things to try to do to combat what they know. So we will see if that holds true today. For those enjoying the show, please share and like it on whatever platform you're watching it on. If you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. You'll help us out a lot. If you've got a question for us, I know we've done a adequate or less than adequate job of trying to get to all the comments and the questions. We're going to try to do a better job of that today. If you have a question, leave it in the chat box. We'll try to get it answered during the show. If you leave a score prediction, we'll try to get to that as well. I always want to start this show off like we do. Beyond the X's and O's, we get a big picture view on what we expect today. Greg, I would say that the identities of NFL teams start to form around now. You got 3 weeks in, and if you look at the Eagles right now, I mean, it's really hard to say anything other than what they do in the trenches is being their identity. Would you agree with that? Like this is, from all the tape you watch, is this the team that is the most physically imposing in both trenches?
I would say absolutely, Jeff, that the Eagles have the best combination of O-line and D-line in the NFL. And I think when you have that, you can compete every week, even if other players, skilled players, other players don't necessarily perform to their highest level. When you can rely on your O-line to be dominant and your D-line to be dominant, dominant's a relative word, of course, but for the most part, they're so good up front on both sides of the ball. They can control games. And, we've seen that, I think, because I think we would probably both agree that offensively, they've certainly not played up to their capabilities that we saw a year ago. We'll get into that further, I'm sure. Defensively, that rotation, that group that they put out there in that defensive front, going 7, 8, 9 deep is as good as it gets in the league. And that's definitely a trend in the league, by the way. More and more teams are really loading up on D linemen, trying to anyway, quality D linemen, because no matter how good your D line is, it's hard for a D lineman to play 65, 70 snaps a game. It's just hard, particularly when you get no huddle, when you get tempo. Those guys are just not built to do that. But when all's said and done, the Eagles' combination of O-line and D-line, based on my film study anyway, is the best in the NFL.
Nice. Well, I'm sure the Eagles fan are very, very proud to hear that. They invest so much in the trenches. Jason, I want to focus on something defensive with you. Again, big picture here. A lot of defenses these days in the NFL, including what we've seen from the Eagles, it seems like the whole idea for everybody is to keep the deep ball away, right? Keep the plays in front of you. Do you remember a time like when you played where there were so many too high coverages and so many clouds, like so much emphasis on keeping everything in front as there is right now?
It all depends on the players and who you have. If you have dogs out there at the receiver position that can blow the game open, of course. Deshaun saw a good, and also, so it's two things. It's the package that you have outside. If you have Waddle and Hill, you're going to see some too high coverages, right? Try to keep it in front. Yeah. You have Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin. You're going to see those things, and then you add the other element to it that Jalen Hurts is mobile. Now it just feeds into that, right? So it's a combination of Jalen Hurts being mobile and having AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, all of these guys. You're trying to keep it in front, and that's what defense coordinators have to do. They're figuring out ways to still bring pressure, but still trying to minimize that deep play. And Jalen has been impatient at times. He wants it. He wants it really badly, and but. There's times it all depends on who the player. If you're playing with a bunch of guys that can't, you'll see man a lot. So,
right. But
we are fortunate to have some dogs out there.
Yeah, I mean, we are in the golden era of passing games, and I remember you guys all remember like maybe the Arizona team that had, I think, the 3,000-yard receivers, Larry Fitzgerald and Steve Bresson, and who am I forgetting? Was it Anquan Bolden?
Anquan Bolden.
Yeah, right. And then even the Vikings team of maybe Chris Carter and Moss and Jake Reed, those were considered. Whoa, almost outlaw. This is an amazing combination. But you look at the NFL today, just to have a Smith and AJ Brown at Goddard, right? You just mentioned Miami Dolphins. You see Jordan Addison now being a nice compliment to Justin Jefferson. I mean, it's not uncommon for teams to have 2 or 3 really prolific, if not, receivers / tight ends weapons. So I just think we're sort of in this golden age now. And maybe what we're seeing is defenses trying to now adjust to that, having all these guys.
I think the other thing, Jeff, the reason you're probably seeing a little more zone coverage anyway, is also you're seeing more quarterbacks that can run. And, you get into third down situations, 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8. I was watching the Commanders and the Bills last week, obviously, we're going to talk Commanders. and it was an early third down, I believe, and they went man coverage. And Allen just ran for whatever it was, 13, 14 yards. And there's more quarterbacks like that. Shoot, Jared Goff ran for 11 yards in the red zone on Thursday night when the Packers played man coverage, and no one thinks about Jared Goff as someone who can do that. And he really can. You're not necessarily game planning Jared Goff that way. But the point is there's more and more quarterbacks who are capable of doing that, particularly on third down. So you have to feel really, really comfortable if you're going to play man, whether you want to have a specific kind of rush, whether you want to use a spy, which there's a lot of defensive coaches in the league that don't like to do that because they almost feel like it's just wasting a player. But, so you tend to see more zone where there's eyes on the quarterback. That doesn't automatically mean it works, but at least there's eyes on the quarterback.
Definitely. 100%. All right. Last thing, Adam, for you, the Eagles, we'll get into the injury situation, but obviously down another safety with Sidney Brown that we'll talk about. So linebacker injury, Avonte Maddox, nickel corner injury, safety injury, just in general. What do you think is the threshold here that the Eagles have where they can continue to dominate games despite losing guys on defense?
Well, it's not, the thing is though, they haven't lost other than Maddox, and that's a big one. That's a nickel corners on the field a lot, particularly this team, and that's the big one. But other than that, it's back end players, it's depth. You worry about it today in particular. They've got a game today against Washington, and yes, it's a team that they know, but Washington's very gifted at the wide receiver position. On any given game, Sam Howell could get it together if they could protect, and we'll get into that later in the show. But when you look at it, the Eagles are addressing 3 healthy safeties today. One of them is Tristan McCullum, who's never played in an NFL game before in the regular season.
Right.
So you worry about that. We'll see about Justin Evans in terms of if he could hold up, although he did take his normal starters reps on Friday's practice. But where it becomes a real problem, Geoff, as we get later into the season, week 7 against Miami, the best passing game in the National Football League, Buffalo, you've got other Kansas City,
San Francisco.
Dallas. The depth is going to be tested. And you know what's interesting? We got a hold of the workouts this week, Geoff. They didn't work out a corner or a safety. They did work out a punter, but not a corner or safety.
That was mind-boggling to me as well. But all right, we'll see. You're right. It's the easier, quote unquote, easier part of the schedule now compared to later. So we'll see how the health situation progresses or doesn't as we go throughout the weeks here. All right, let us get into that injury report. As we mentioned, the Eagles are shorthanded. They continue to be shorthanded in the back end. They'll be without nickelback Avonte Maddox, out indefinitely with the torn pec. They will play their 3rd straight game without linebacker Nakobe Dean, who's going to miss at least one more game. It should just be one more game as he remains on the short-term IR with a foot injury, and hopefully they'll have him back in 2 weeks. They're also going to be without, as we mentioned, rookie safety Sidney Brown, the 3rd-round pick, who played 12 snaps Monday night before he had to leave with a hamstring injury that's going to keep him out today. And some interesting notes on Sidney Brown in those few snaps that he's played that we'll get to. And then, of course, they'll be without wide receiver Quez Watkins, who will miss his second straight game with a hamstring injury. Now, Quez got on the practice field this week in a limited fashion, which we thought was pretty good for him, but obviously not good enough to be able to play today. So perhaps next week. We did note that last week, James Bradbury took a lot of Maddox's reps in the slot. We'll get into that. Safety Justin Evans, who was questionable with a shoulder injury, expected to play today. So as Adam, you mentioned, 3 safeties, and then with the elevation of Tristan McCullum, that gives him a 4th safety, but really 3 safeties who've actually played in the NFL before. So a little thin in that area. Wide receiver, obviously, Olamide Zaccheaus, who caught the touchdown Monday night. He will get those slot snaps in place of Quez Watkins. And the Eagles welcome back running back Boston Scott, who missed the last game from a concussion. So we will see if that changes the running back rotation. And Adam, I don't imagine that's going to threaten what we've seen from DeAndre Swift for the last 2 weeks. But we do know they like to get Boston Scott the occasional, 2 or 3 carries at some point in the game.
Well, here's the thing. With Devin Allen not elevated, he almost certainly will be the kickoff returner, and this probably will mean that Rashad Penny's inactive, which wouldn't be a surprise to anyone. I mean, you saw him on the sideline just with his helmet. He didn't take his helmet off, even though he probably knew he wasn't going to play. So that's pretty much it. Now, the interesting thing is, and teams don't like doing this, and I'm surprised they did this, they're only having 4 receivers active today. That's a little tricky. And remember, Britton Covey's really only a slot. I know Zaccheaus could play inside or outside. That's a gamble there. Most teams won't do that, but the Eagles are today.
You wonder if it opens the door for the new tight end that they got from Denver right before the trade deadline, Albert O, to perhaps be active. That would give them 4 tight ends. He has not been active yet. Andrew DeCecco wrote a really nice story on insidethebirds.com about it today. He basically said, I needed some weeks. Jason Michael, the tight ends coach, has done an excellent job of catching me up to speed, and now I'm ready to go. And Greg, just real quick, in case he is active today, what kind of mismatch tight end is Albert O if the Eagles are able to get him on the field?
Well, he's an athletic tight end. So, as you said, Jeff, I mean, is it possible that they could go with more 12 personnel and still spread the formation? Because we know Goddard can split out and detach. Albert O is that kind of tight end. So there may be a package, for him where obviously he's not going to play 40 snaps, but there may be a package where they detach Goddard or Albert O from the formation and see what they get from the Commanders defense, who like to play, and we'll get into this as well. They play big nickel is really their base defense. So they play with 3 safeties.
Right.
So yeah, you could see something like that for sure, given that they only have 4 wide receivers up today.
Gotcha. Jason, a special teams question for you, since you were a big special teamer throughout your career. The Eagles will elevate Braden Mann. They have elevated him today for the 2nd time, so they've got 1 left. He's the punter, the new punter. It looked like the operation on the field goal, which is a big part of the punter's job to hold, was pretty good Monday night in the rain. I believe Jake Elliott made all of his kicks. Is that something you were kind of honed in on, knowing that they were not just subbing out punters, but now you've got a new holder in the operation there?
Well, that's huge, and believe it or not, the guy that holds is very important because he is in cahoots with the kicker, and the kicker is very, very important. So he has a say when it comes to the special teams coach decision. If a guy can't get that snap down properly, the kicker is going to have a problem, and the kickers are very, very meticulous about the way that it's down. It can't be left or right. It can't be a certain way. It has to be leaned at a certain degree. It's very, very anal, the kickers are. So if he did a good job in the rain, I'm pretty sure he'll do a good job in the future. And I'm pretty sure that Jake Elliott will be happy with that.
Yeah, I'm chuckling a little bit because
it's a big decision. It is.
Yeah.
It's weird, but kickers are very, very, because, it's a lot of pressure on them. Everyone says, this is the only job they have. So, yeah, they're going to be very, very anal. I remember holding for David Akers. He kicked the first couple of times he kicked me out of it. Get him out of here, coach.
I knew that's why I was chuckling, because as you're saying how meticulous and how anally retentive they are, I'm picturing David Akers, because I knew exactly what you were referring to. Everybody said how crazy he was for that.
No, they are. He kicked me out the first couple of times until I got yeah.
That's funny. All right. Well, hey, rarely, guys, do the Eagles come across a team that is actually less injured than they are, but the Washington Commanders are in really good shape here. They've got a couple of guys on IR who are going to be out. One of them, probably the biggest name, would be a defensive tackle. I know Greg really liked out of Alabama, 2nd-year guy, Fedarian Mathis. But also, the other guys, Troy Apke, Dax Milne, these guys are on IR, contributors, not necessarily starters. The one big injury for them, if it's that big, is I believe their 3rd-string running back, Chris Rodriguez Jr., is going to be out. He's had an illness, so he will not be able to make the game. Now, the good news for Washington side is that Logan Thomas, their really tall tight end, productive tight end, who was out last week with a concussion, will be able to play for them today. Was Chris Rodriguez even playing much of a role for them, Greg?
Well, no.
I'm sorry, Adam, Greg, whoever.
No, he was not. He was not playing very much. So, because obviously Brian Robinson is number 1, Gibson is really number 2.
Right.
Rodriguez, he hasn't been playing much, so that's not a big loss for them.
The one thing I would add, Jeff, is that because of Gibson's fumbling problems, he had a real bad one earlier this season. He's not going to get benched right now. They can't do it, but we're not surprised if Rodriguez takes over for Gibson later on. Gibson is good in the pass game.
Yeah,
but he's had so many bad fumbles in his career. It's been a problem. I mean, it's been an ongoing problem for him. And Rodriguez is a pretty talented kid, but as you said, he is out today.
Yeah, today. And it just occurred to me, with Kenny Gainwell back, you got a nice little, running backs from Memphis clash going on here with Antonio Gibson and Kenneth Gainwell. All right, before we get into these great matchups, guys, last week was brutal for your Survivor contests. All the big teams lost, Cowboys, but the ultimate revival Survivor contest is live on Splash Sports. Splash Sports is the #1 place to get back into the contest. So starting October 8th, Splash Sports will have its 6-figure revival Survivor contest going live. So head to the link in the description box, slashsports.com/insidethebirds, and make sure to enter. The contest begins October 8th for the quest to win 6 figures. That's splashsports.com/insidethebirds for the quest to win 6 figures. I don't know about you guys, but I'd love to win 6 figures.
So would I.
I mean, maybe not Jay, because 6 figures, nothing of these.
Right.
Come on, you're a businessman, Mr. Launch Trampoline.
Hey, listen, I still need 6 figures. I need me one of them Deion Sanders chains.
That would be nice. He better start winning some games again if he wants to wear that chain like that.
I know. I still need to get me one of those chains.
All right. Well, hey, we got a little NFC East divisional Donnybrook going on today. And there's no question, as we were talking about, that the backbone for the Eagles' success on defense so far begins up front. The Eagles lead the NFL by quite a wide margin in run defense. They're allowing so far just 48.3 yards on the ground. That is tops in the NFL, and teams are averaging 3.02 yards per carry against them. That's only 4th, so they clearly have room to improve there. So before we break down the whole run defense versus Washington's run offense and offense in general, let's discuss why the Eagles have been so good up front. Greg, we saw Tampa on Monday night try to establish a run game as much as it possibly could. We saw New England try to do it too in the season opener, and neither of these teams were successful. In fact, I got a laugh at Todd Bowles. I think they asked him after the game Monday night, what did you think about your running game? And he said, well, we didn't have one, which it's kind of the symmetry of that being a Tampa Bay head coach and the whole, what do you think of your team's execution? I'm all in favor of it. Couldn't be ignored on that from quote Coach McKay back in the day. But anyway, I want to ask you, Greg, how much of what they're doing is talent versus also what they're doing from a schematic standpoint on the line movement, slanting, things of that nature, strategically against the run? You break that down for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a combination, but I think that it's a talent thing as well. Don't forget, if you're going to line up in a 5-man front, which is basically, kind of what they do a lot, you're going to get a lot of one-on-one blocks. And it's really difficult to move these interior guys. I mean, in their base defense, you've got Davis, who's essentially the 0. Now, Carter has not played a ton in the base yet. That'll probably come down the road, because normally what they do in their true base is inside they have Cox, Davis, and Milton Williams. Mm-hmm. And Milton Williams has really shown the ability this season, and I think we saw flashes of it in previous seasons, but he has really shown the ability to control and displace offensive guards. And when you can do that one-on-one, it's really, really difficult to generate a running game. And we've seen what Jordan Davis has been able to do this year, playing the nose in their base defense. He really controls the center, and not only controls them, but he can play off of them as well. So it's really hard to get them moved off the initial point of attack. And when you can't do that, it's hard to run the football. Now, the Commanders will try to run the football. Obviously, they can't play any other way. I mean, if they get caught in a game, which we all think could well happen, where Sam Howell has to drop back 40 or 45 times, that's not going to be a good thing. And first of all, the Commanders' O-line is not, by NFL standards, one of the better ones in the league. And I'm probably being kind. It's probably average to below average. So they're in a tough situation going into this game against, an Eagles defensive front that is just really, really good.
Right. I want to go back to Milton Williams because, Adam, it reminds me of a lot of conversations we had in the offseason when we were trying to figure out, with Javon Hargrave out, how does the 5-man front look? Different candidates, they signed Kentavious Street, they draft Jalen Carter, they've got Milton Williams, and I like Milton Williams's season so far because he's a guy who he's what I call, I have the term, beats the scouting report. The scouting report was short arms, right? Remember, and maybe probably more of an interior burst pass rusher than a guy who can play on rundowns. But here's a case where he's holding up pretty well and doing his job.
Yeah, look, I'd say both teams are happy. From the famous video a couple of years ago when the Eagles were supposed to draft Aleem McNeil, who's been a terrific nose for the Lions, and Milton Williams has probably exceeded expectations. He's obviously can play in when you need him to. But the thing that has shocked me, they're playing 60 tackles. Who does it? They have to be the only NFL team that dresses 6 and actually uses them. We thought 4 or 5. They're actually, Jeff, using 6 and Tui Pelotu. You saw at the sack last week.
Yeah. Yeah. Jay, how much is this helping the linebackers? We always talk about the linebackers have to be kept clean, And after week 1, where I thought that, there were some struggles, obviously new personnel, but you lose Nakobe Dean and everyone thinks, oh man, they're in trouble now. But Nick Morrow is filled in. Zach Cunningham continues to play. Is that the biggest thing for them right now? Is that they're getting a pretty good path to the ball carrier?
Exactly. Like you can see it last week on the safety. They were in heavy personnel. The Eagles were 5-man front, had 2 double teams, eligible 64 right at playing right tight end, and then a tackle double team Jalen Carter, and then a guard and a center double team and Jordan Davis. Stymied both of them, both the double teams. Well, Jalen defeated his double team pretty quick with his hands and then got penetration. Jordan Davis just destroyed his double team, and it made a path for Morrow to shoot the gap and get the safety, and also Cunningham to defeat the guards block, destroying it. So it would have been a safety with either one of the linebackers because the 2 guys up front. So yeah, the guys in front are keeping the linebackers clean. And I will say this is that when Jalen Carter is in on run plays, it's not just Milton Williams. When he's in on run plays, he's defeating blocks handily and controlling the line of scrimmage. And then you know what the other thing is? These young guys are giving the older guys, Fletcher Cox, Graham, life again. And there's nothing like it because that's what happens. When you come, I remember coming in as a rookie and me and Hank Basket like set training camp on fire. We started doing this down the field drill, and me and Hank took turns catching balls down the field. And it was a big thing for the Eagles coming, during that time. They would never make contested catches, with the group before us, and they never made down the field catches, consistently. And it just reinvigorated those guys and gave them more energy. And that's what happens when you get these younger players in there. It just gives the older guys life. So yes, we're keeping the linebackers clean, and it's by committee, not just 1 or 2 guys.
Hey
Greg,
Jeff,
go ahead.
I don't want to take exception to what you said, but I just pulled up my Milton Williams scouting report because I did him obviously in detail when he came out, and he went to Louisiana Tech, and my guess is that's one reason he was drafted in the 3rd round. Correct, Adam? 3rd round?
Yep.
Yes,
yep.
3rd round.
Sure.
I really, really liked his tape. Now, again, you get caught up in the Power 5 schools and the level of competition, and there's no question that, as we all know, that sometimes tempers a player's evaluation for certain scouts and for certain teams. But, I really liked his tape. I mean, just to read something I typed from watching him, I said what consistently stood out was how strong a run defender he was, with excellent leverage and hand usage to control and displace O-linemen while maintaining his balance to find the ball. Now, we've seen that in the NFL. I saw that in college. So, I don't necessarily think he's outplayed his draft status. My sense is if he was playing at a Power 5 school, he might have been a higher draft pick. His college tape was really, really good. And again, I'm not one who talks about where guys get drafted and, hey, they got a steal, they got this, or he could have been drafted here, he could have been drafted there. I just watched him, I just watched these guys on tape, as you guys know, and I thought Milton Williams was a really, really good prospect and was pretty pleased when the Eagles drafted him. And I think he's playing to what I thought he was based on his college tape.
Sure. Greg, I think you're making a really good point. And pointing accusatory fingers at people, because like 9 times out of 10, the people that Adam and I speak to and you speak to are involved in the NFL who do it for a living. 9 times out of 10, they're right. You know, they're usually dead on. But I
mean, these guys do this for a living. You know,
right.
But human beings evaluating human beings, so people are going to be wrong no matter how many tests you have and all that.
Exactly. Well, that's what I was going to bring up. The whole analytics element of that. I definitely think there's this part of, well, Milton Williams' tape against the run is very good, as you were mentioning at LA Tech, but he has short arms. And so a lot of people are going to then, maybe it's a natural human nature thing that's saying it's pretty tough for short-armed defensive tackles in the NFL to be really good against the run. So that's our concern. And then they echo that to like when Adam and I do our homework, and then it becomes, well, short arms is a concern. And we try to say nobody should, it doesn't mean a person can't do it. It would just be the concern at the NFL level.
No, and your point's a good one, because what teams do, and I don't do this because I'm one person. Teams have staffs that do all this kind of stuff. Right. You know, I can't do all that. I just love watching tape, but I can't go back 30 years or 20 years and you know, they do studies like this that say, hey, short arm guys, you know, are not as likely percentage wise based on 25 years of a draft, right, you know, to be as effective as longer arm guys. You know, they do these kinds of studies. Like I said, you know, I can't do that. You know, I mean, there's only so many hours in the day for me. And I just love watching tape, but you know, you still have to watch a guy play football. And at some point, and again, I'll be wrong, just like other people will be wrong. You know, and believe me, when I'm wrong, they let me know about it on social media as if I'm wrong on every single person. But, you know, but I thought that watching his tape in particular, I thought this guy was going to play in the NFL. And I remember having great conversations with Fran Duffy from the Eagles, who does a ton of draft work. And we both came away thinking Milton Williams was a really, really good prospect. And this was before the Eagles drafted him, obviously.
Right. Jay, you were going to say something?
No, these guys have families to feed, right? The scouts. So they're going to go with the probability.
Right.
Or, you know, so if they have the years and it's a 75% chance that this guy doesn't make it, but there's an outlier, they're not going to put their money on the outlier. They're going to put their money on what the history says.
Correct.
Right.
And so they could be wrong sometimes.
Sure. Like the guy who always jumps out to me, Jay, at your position would be Anquan Bolden, who was one of the most successful receivers in the NFL, but he ran a 4.6.
He ran a 4.72, and I was in the dome when he ran it, and there was an audible sigh when he ran a 4.72, as if, oh my God, this guy just can't play.
Right.
And I guess he did okay, Jay. Didn't he do okay?
Wow.
He did okay. And you know why he did okay. He was tough as hell. That's one. But he had great contact balance. So even though you can catch up to him, you couldn't knock the dude over. And I was like, dude, I should have did that when I was a kid. I should have just hung out on like Bosu balls and got my ankle strong. But this dude had great, exceptional balance. And that's one thing that no one ever talks about with him. But he had exceptional balance. You couldn't knock him over.
Excellent. So now the question, as we move into what we were going to discuss about Washington's offense against this top-ranked defense, Eagles run defense, what happens when you have a run defense this good and you're going up against a coaching staff with Washington that wants to and expects to work off of its run game? Ron Rivera, he's a known run game enthusiast. He lured Eric Bieniemy away from Kansas City this offseason to get the former NFL back onto his staff, become the offensive designer, be the play caller. Greg, through 3 weeks, what have you noticed about the Commanders' offense with Eric Bieniemy making the calls and designing the plays, specifically with their run game, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think they obviously do want to run the ball. Brian Robinson is a specific kind of runner. I think he's really good at that, but he's a specific kind of runner. He's a sustainer. He's a grinder. He's not going to run 60 yards for a touchdown, but certainly if he gets to the second and third level, he can get a 20-yard run here and there. We've seen that. You know, I think he's a physical runner. I think he's a competitive runner. You know, the big question is, how will they use their run game? In other words, whenever you face a team that really defends the run really well and you're a little bit overmatched, is how do you choose to run? Do you try to come out on first down and run the football? Do you view your offense more as, well, we have to throw more on first down out of our base personnel? Don't forget, they can line up with 2 tight ends. And with Logan Thomas back, even without Logan Thomas, they still had Cole Turner, who's a big receiving tight end, and John Bates, who's kind of a multi-dimensional tight end who can be a receiver and a blocker. So they can line up in 12 personnel. We'll see if they want to throw the ball on first down. But keep in mind where Eric Bieniemy came from, Jeff. Andy Reid. They know they're overmatched. Coaches know this stuff. You guys have talked to a lot of coaches, and Jay, you know this yourself. Coaches know when they're overmatched. They're not going to say that publicly. There's no way Ron Rivera is going to have a press conference and say, gee, we're overmatched this week. He's not going to say that, but they know that. So now Eric Bieniemy comes from Andy Reid, who Jay knows extremely well how he sees the game. And there's going to be, I don't want to say trick plays, because I hate that word, trick plays. I don't know if I'd call what Andy Reid does trick plays, but there's going to be some kind of something different that the Eagles have not seen and have not prepared for. And the hope is, if you're a Commanders fan, is that those plays work. Because they just can't line up and play normal football in this game and expect to put up 28 or 30 points.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Greg. In fact, so great. We think alike. I've literally written that question into the script to ask Jason, being an Andy Reid, a guy who played for Andy Reid and Marty, when you guys went up against teams, right, that you knew were really good in a certain area, whether it was pass defense, run defense, and then applying that today, I was going to have you put your offensive coordinator cap on and say, what unexpected should the Eagles try to expect today? Is there something that you think Washington will do to catch the Eagles defensive line off guard, whether it's more misdirections, counters, reverses, Curtis Samuel? What would you do if you were Washington?
Historically, the Eagles have been bad at and I'm talking about recent bad, last year, when it comes to reverses and misdirections and things of that nature. Like they have been. They've shown lack of discipline when it comes to those types of plays. So I'm pretty sure in order to keep the defensive line at bay, you're going to see some screens, you're going to see some misdirection, you're going to see some throwbacks, you're going to see anything that's going to tip the scales and make it more even, like Greg is saying, right? So, and that's what those plays do. Those plays causes the defensive line to slow down and to think. And that's the goal for the offensive coordinators, to try to get the defensive line to slow down so they won't wreck the game. So whatever I can do to slow them down, if that's a tunnel screen, if that's something, and hear me out here. We don't have Vontae Maddox. Vontae Maddox is a pretty physical player that likes to come down and make plays. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily know if James Bradbury signed up for that. and they have a few grease men. And here, this is what I call a grease man, a guy you can throw the ball at the line of scrimmage and make a play. They have a few of them, right? Mm-hmm. So if I can get a big enough guy out there to get him on Bradbury, get him on Job, get him on those types of players, Slay, I think that's a win for the Commanders. Mm-hmm. So you got to think of where our weaknesses are, and I think that's where the offense coordinator will attack.
A couple of points playing off that, if I could, Jeff.
Yep.
Number one, they're a very good screen team. They're very good both with tunnel screens, because they have guys like Samuel, who's really good with the ball in his hands, even conventional screens, to Brian Robinson and to Antonio Gibson. They had a big Gibson screen 2 weeks ago for 36 yards late in the game that was really critical in beating Denver. The other point is, and it's interesting what Jay said about Bradbury, which the Eagles obviously know that, because what did the Eagles do in the first half last week? They played, and they can't do it this week because Sidney Brown's out. They played 12 snaps of big nickel, okay? Mm-hmm. We hadn't seen that before from the Eagles. They played 12 snaps of big nickel with Sidney Brown essentially the slot. And they did that a couple of times on 3rd and long, too, not just on 1st and 10. Mm-hmm. So obviously that's something, they know what Jay said. Coach, contrary to what fans might think, coaches know everything about their players. They're with them every single day. Mm-hmm. They know about their players. And they know Bradbury is, as Jay said, is not necessarily that guy to be inside and to be, despite his size, to be a physical player along those lines. So my sense is I don't know who the big nickel player would be today if they were to play big nickel. So I guess we're going to have to wait and see on that.
Yeah, I don't think Tristan McCullum is the type of guy that they want to put in that spot. I mean, he is tall and lengthy, but I don't know if he's compactly built like Sydney and has a record that Sydney has.
Sydney is a physical, competitive guy.
Right.
I mean, that's what his college tape showed as well. I mean, this guy plays with a swagger. He's tough. He's physical. That's his game. He's straight line fast and he's physical. That's his game right now. And he'll probably improve in other areas because from what I understand, he's that kind of kid. But that's his game right now. And, you know, so they played 12 snaps of big nickel, and he's now not playing today.
And we'll see what they do to combat that. So far, the Commanders are 15th in the NFL in their run game. They're averaging 106.3 yards per game. They are averaging 4.98, almost 5 yards per carry, which ranks third in the NFL. Greg mentioned Brian Robinson off to a good start, 217 yards, NFL's eighth leading rusher. Adam, you always make this point, right, that we get from personnel people, that any team theoretically should be able to get its run designs off on another team. You've got mathematical blocking advantages. You've got scheming in ways to get numbers favorable, but personnel also matters here. And no matter what the Commanders can think of, I would imagine that they're going to be limited by what they have up front, which is what we talked about on Inside the Birds all week, is that offensive line.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. There's no question about it. In fact, they're clearly a bottom five offensive line. Cosme's playing guard where he's really a natural tackle. Charles Leno sort of revived his career when the Bears cut him. Definitely did a good job there. Sadiq Charles is really a tackle, playing inside. This is, I mean, I know they got to play the game out, but on paper, Geoff, it's going to be very difficult. Now, by formation, and I'm talking to coaches over the years, they don't go and think they can't run. They know what the numbers show them, what the tape shows them. You could see, not only could you see 12 personnel, you might see 13 personnel, which is 3 tight ends. Yep. Greg talked about it. John Bates is a good player. No one really talks about him, third-year tight end. Logan Thomas is back this game. They'll do what they can. But Eric Bieniemy, see, he doesn't come from the Ron Rivera, we want to run the ball first.
Right.
Yes, the personnel might tell you that they'd like to because Brian Robinson's gotten off to a good start, but he would prefer to throw the ball more. So I'm interested to see what they do. Do they go and think they can't run? Or do they try to be aggressive and say, you know what, we got to throw the football here, but Sam Howell's that guy you saw last week. You don't want to ask him to do a lot because he did not handle it well.
Right. Craig, has Curtis Samuel been any kind of weapon for them in the run game, or the gimmick, we call it gimmick, in the misdirect? Anything that the Eagles?
I mean, not up to this point, but, you know, then it's all a function of who you played. And keep one thing in mind. Sam Howell is essentially a rookie for the most part. He started one game last year, so he's going to have ups and downs. The week before, he did something really impressive. He came back in Denver. They were down 21-3, and he made big-time throws. And he's willing to stand and deliver, sometimes to his detriment, but he is willing to stand and deliver and make throws. Now, there's no question they don't want him by choice dropping back 45 times, but he is capable of making throws and making big-time throws. The touchdown he threw to McLaurin week 2 against Denver was a big-time NFL throw for a young quarterback. And there were some nuances to that play as well that he showed. Last week, you know, not every interception was his fault. Not every sack was his fault. But, you know, the thing is he's a tough kid who thinks, you know, he has a little bit of the attitude that, hey, I don't want to have any negative plays and I'm going to make something happen. And you have to kind of work through that in the NFL because it doesn't always work like that.
Right.
And today, yes, are they overmatched? Could he have another bad game? Sure, he could. But he is also capable of making throws. So Adam makes a really good point, though, where Bieniemy's background is not the same as the way Ron Rivera sees the game.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see what that mix is. And we'll get into this as we go further in the show. But then it comes down to the Commanders' defense, because it's how the game plays out. If all of a sudden it's 17-3 Eagles in the middle of the second quarter, you know, then you're in a little different situation. If it's 10-7 in the middle of the second quarter, you can play the game a whole lot differently.
Yeah, right. So I know we're looking at the score last week's game, and you're considering, and you say, okay, they got beat 37-3. That game was a 2-score game in the fourth quarter.
It was, yeah.
It was a lot closer than, and when you watch the tape, it was a lot closer than it looked, and then it just spiraled out of control. And they averaged 8 yards a carry that game. It's just that they got down and they couldn't do it anymore, right? So if they can stay close, they're going to run the football. And that's the one thing about Bieniemy, that he always had a problem with Coach Reed, and he's a very, very out front and vocal guy. So you know when he has a problem. That's the problem that about Coach Bieniemy. If he has a problem, everybody knows he has a problem. He likes to run the ball a little bit more than Coach Reed. That's
I think everybody likes to run the ball just a little bit more than
Andy Reid. He's a running back by nature. He wants to give his guys some. Yeah,
of course. All right, let's that's good stuff. Let's talk about that nickel package that we were discussing before. First, I want to remind everybody to check out our friends at phlsportsnation.com. They are enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at phlsportsnation. All right, so as you guys mentioned, we did see the debut of James Bradberry as a nickelback last week. Also, Sidney Brown he did play 12 snaps, and a lot of that was in the slot, as Greg alluded to. Sidney Brown will not be available today. James Bradberry and Josh Jobe, the spotlight focuses on them again. Jason, are you expecting something different against Washington, given what you just said? Do you think Bradberry just plays the slot and Jobe plays outside, or do they have to think of something else? And what would that be?
No, I think that's what we're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do believe that Josh Jobe put some things on tape that's going to cause him to get attacked more.
Off coverage?
Yeah, giving up off coverage, his late reactions, things of that nature. I just think that teams feel that, and any team would, because you have Slay on the other side. So it's either Slay or Jobe. So I don't want to say it like, he's playing so bad that, teams are going to attack him now. It's just that he hadn't did anything that says, okay, let us think about this twice. And so I think that he's going to be a target, in this game. And also Bradberry has to learn the rules of playing the slot and know where his leverage is and things of that nature. All of those things come with timing. You haven't been in there in a while, or you hadn't been in there. You have to learn how. The slot is a lot tougher than playing outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's more responsibilities.
They went after him early, right? Where Godwin caught the 3rd and 3 on him for about 15, and it looked a little bit too easy for the offense at that point.
Yeah, there were some plays that guys were open. They didn't always get to him because the defensive line was getting home. So that's the good thing.
Yeah. Greg, I'm sure you noticed it too, but I when I was watching the tape, I thought, man, if I'm Kate Otten the next day, I'm going over to Baker and showing him a few times where it looked to me like he's 88, right? Yeah, I thought there were a couple of plays if Baker just looked his way a little bit, he might have been able to move the chains. But, you do have to credit the Eagles defense for also making him jittery in the pocket there. What was were you surprised, Greg, a little bit about Jobe's coverage and the way how off he was? Because we've all talked about
again, and that's a function, I guess, of a call. Jay might know better than I, but I mean, there were a number of calls where he was clearly playing off coverage and he gave up shorter throws in front of him.
Right.
If you're playing off coverage like that, you're going to give up those throws.
Of course.
That's the thing. That's what you're giving up when you're playing that coverage. If you're playing 9 yards off and they run a 5-yard speed out, you're not making a play on the ball.
Right.
As we discussed last week, I don't think he's at his best playing off coverage anyway. I think he's at his best playing press. I think that's his mentality. That's the way he feels comfortable. And I think that it's just natural that a guy in his 3rd NFL start, that assuming there's protection, and that's a critical point here, assuming there's protection, they're going to go after him. I mean, they've got 3 really good receivers and 2 with a lot of juice in McLaurin and Dotson. So they're going to go after him, and then we'll see what happens. But then we'll see what the Eagles call as well. If they call coverages where he's 8 or 9 yards off, we'll see how that plays out. If it's coverages where he can play press, and sometimes Jay knows this, sometimes depending on the coverage, they'll allow the corner to play the technique he's most comfortable playing. I don't know if that's the case with the Eagles, and I don't know if that's the case with Jobe, but I know with veteran corners, sometimes they allow that to happen. Hey, we're calling this coverage, but you're comfortable playing it this way, play it that way if you want to play it that way. But no, there's no question he's going to get tested. He's a quarterback at a corner in his 3rd start. And it's not as if he came out, as a top 10 draft choice. So he's going to get tested.
Yeah, and he has to have some situational awareness. And like Greg said, he's just young, right? Just because they call off coverage, it's 3rd and 4. You just have to, you gotta know the situation.
Right.
Things like that. One of those plays, and I know you saw this, Nolan Smith, the one of Mike Evans when he caught the slant backside, they put everybody over to the right and they had one-on-one with Joe. Nolan Smith was supposed to be the inside help right there. He didn't get deep enough, but he could have had a pick that play because Baker did not see him. Yeah, it was a good defensive call. Joe was outside leverage, so it was an easy pitch and catch because he wasn't in the right position.
Adam, how surprised are you that as this week went on with Sidney Brown and Justin Evans, both, they missed some practice time with injuries, even though Justin Evans probably going to go today. Just in general, the Eagles with these injuries have not signed. I know Jason and Quentin Michael on the Q&A pod thought that maybe the Eagles would be better off signing a veteran slot like a Chris Harris, just, to make the defense more stable. But they didn't, I don't even think they worked anybody out at that position, correct?
No, in fact, they just worked a punter out of all things. And no, this week they have not. Now, we're only in week 4. I'm sure they're going to work out a veteran corners or safeties coming up. There are a bunch of them out there, by the way. So the clubs have leverage. There's some guys who are looking for jobs here. But, as we were saying earlier, right now it may not be a problem. But when you get to the middle of the season where they have just an unbelievably difficult schedule, and those teams could really throw the football to spread you out as well. Oh, one thing we should mention, the Eagles, Jeff, you and I saw this at training camp. They were running big nickel. I remember saying to you, I wonder if they're going to do this in the regular season. As you guys just pointed out, they're doing it. Now, the question is, once they get healthier at safety, do they do that even more? Because it was definitely something was noticeable in training camp with those 3 safeties out there.
Well, what we discussed, right, is how are the Eagles going to defend the pass out of a nickel package? Because we knew Zach Cunningham pass coverage was not his forte. Yep. So if you wanted to be in your sort of nickel, your 4-2 on 3rd down, then you would have Cunningham on the field. And then we said, well, maybe you would take him off and put an extra safety on in a bigger nickel look. But with the injuries that they've had to both Nakobe Dean and then to the secondary, it's kind of thrown everything out of whack as far as us trying to forecast who they're going to put out there. I mean, certainly, even though we mentioned in training camp, James Bradbury was cross-training at slot corner, I don't think we expected by week 3 to see James Bradbury full-time being a slot corner. I mean, the guy's paid over $12 million a year to not have to be a slot corner.
But they don't have you're right, but they don't have a choice. They don't have anybody else. And that's on your question and your point, which is well taken. At some point, they're going to have to bring in a veteran nickel. They'd have to do that. It's just, this is not going to work against the better teams. You might get by personnel. Yes, Washington has Curtis Samuel, who plays inside, who's explosive, but they obviously have trouble protecting. But when you play the elite teams, the Bills, the Cowboys, the Niners, by the way, we should mention, these clubs are going to scheme because they see that
the Dolphins are not that far away.
Yeah, week 7. Yeah. Right. That's the first one up. Week 7. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. No.
And they don't really have, and I know Jay would agree with this, I don't really think they have a good pass coverage linebacker right now.
No.
So that it depends on your opponent, obviously, and the way games play out. And they've been fortunate they can control games, and that may continue until they play. Maybe it continues until week 7 when they play the Dolphins. Who knows? Yeah. Every NFL game is different. Look, we saw that last week with the Cards and the Cowboys. Every NFL game is different, and you can't just make assumptions. But the point is, when you're just looking at traits and attributes of players, they do not really have a good pass coverage linebacker on their roster right now.
Right. And again, I don't even know whether we can call Nakobe Dean a good one or not, because we haven't seen enough.
He wasn't that guy in college. So I don't know. You're asking him to do something in the NFL he really didn't do in college. People who may not remember him in college, and I'm sure many do because it's Georgia, but he was a big blitzer in college. He played going forward in college. He didn't really play going backwards.
Right. All right, so obviously something to continue to look at with the Eagles as they go down the road. Jason and Q had some fun about how the Eagles have just been practicing so far because they've been so dominant up front. They haven't been tested.
No, they
in
haven't.
Their weaknesses. So
that game last week, I was happy that we were running the ball, but I was getting annoyed when we were passing the ball so much at the end of the game.
Well,
But it
I'm
was
sure we'll be
practice.
getting into that
Practice.
momentarily.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
All right, I want to finish off the looking at the Eagles defense though, as they go up against, as we talked about, Sam Howell, who's a first-year starting quarterback. Now, I have to be candid with you guys. My predictions have not been very good lately. Last Monday night, I got raked over the coals by the fans because I predicted the Buccaneers to win. You know, after a 2-hour show in which we talked about all the reasons why the Eagles were better, I predicted the Buccaneers to win because why not, right? Sometimes they lose a game that they're supposed to win, like Washington last year, which takes me to that prediction. I said going into the year, I think when we did the show with you, Greg, when we were previewing each team in the NFC East, I said, you know what? You can be certain with Sam Howell at quarterback and not Carson Wentz anymore, you are not going to sack Sam Howell 9 times like the Eagles did last year in week 3. And sure enough, by week 3, I was wrong because he was sacked 9 times.
And he was. And let's remember, 4 of those sacks came in the last 9.5 minutes of the game.
Definitely.
And so I'm not defending anybody, but you know, Jay made a great point. That game was actually relatively competitive and relatively close for quite a while. You know, and then you got later in the game when obviously it started to get out of hand. Sure. And you know, they're just not equipped. Their O-line is just not equipped to play like that. And Howell's not ready to play like that.
Right. In fact, to your point, Greg, you know, even with them being 2-1 and having that kind of a lopsided loss, Howell has been sacked 19 times so far through 3 weeks. And in the past 5 years, the Commanders are the only franchise in the NFL to have multiple 9 sacks allowed games in the last 5 years. So they've done it 2 years in a row on the same week, by the way, week 3.
I know. And I think he will, until he figures it out through experience, Geoff, he'll get sacked because he's willing to stand and deliver, which as a trait in a vacuum, as you evaluate a quarterback, that's a good thing. But you have to then just gain the experience to understand when you can't just stand there as the pocket is being squeezed and closed down. He just has to figure that out the more he plays.
Yes, he does. And I did make a nice catchy little Well, James, our production guy, and Zach, they made a nice little catchy graphic here to show you the historical perspective of a quarterback being sacked 19 times through 3 games. No other team has allowed more than 13 sacks this season. So that's just how far the Commanders are. Far ahead, below, whatever you want to say, the number 2 team. The last time a team had allowed 19 or more sacks through its first 3 weeks was 17 years ago. It was the Raiders who had allowed 19 through the first 3 games of 2006. And in 2005, the year before, the Texans allowed 20 through the first 3 games.
Is that Jamarcus Russell then, by chance?
I believe the 2000, you're talking about the Raiders in 2006, right?
Yeah.
I think it might have been. And I'm pretty sure the 2005 Texans was David Carr, who was sacked 20 times right, through the first 3 games.
Yeah, he got sacked a lot.
2000s, 2006. I don't think that was remarkable.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. I mean, since 1982, which is when the NFL started recognizing the sack as an official stat, only 4 teams have allowed more than 19 sacks through the first 3 games. So this is quite a start that Washington's off to. Adam, you may have to have sources confirm this for us, but I've been told that it's very hard to protect your quarterback if you don't have a very good offensive line. Is that something that your sources can confirm for you?
You'd be correct.
Nailed that one, didn't we?
Yeah. Look, but here's the thing,
Adam has a lot of sources for that.
Yeah, exactly. In my brain, starting with that. But look, if you look at their situation, the 3 of their starters were street free agents, unrestricted or actually released. In Charles Leno's case, he was released. Andrew Wiley did start in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. I remember when we did our preview for that show, Geoff, this is the area people told us you could exploit Wiley. He's not very good. Well, they didn't. And now he cashed in, being a Super Bowl winner with the Chiefs. But Nick Gates is the guy that's been around a little bit with the Giants, but they've not done well with their own draft picks. It's been a problem. And Ron Rivera's defensive head coach, by the way, he has personnel control. He makes all the decisions. With help from Marty Herney and Martin Mayhew, but this is the problem. You're putting a guy who does not quite understand offense well enough. The result would show that in terms of the lack of development of their offensive line. There's a reason why the Eagles generally are very competitive each year. Yes, they're not competitive every year. 2020, we saw that, but it's because it starts with the lines. You would think it's so obvious every team would do it, Geoff, but they don't. Nope. Look at the Bears, by the way, who are an absolute abomination. Paying off-the-ball linebackers over $25 million this season. Their line is awful. There's a reason for it. They have not invested well enough. They have not developed well enough. with Jeffrey Lurie and Joe Banner started this when they came in 1994. You could say what you want about those guys, but they got it right investing in the offensive defensive lines.
Yeah, no doubt. And listen, I'm a big, everybody knows I'm a Penn State guy. I love Jahan Dotson. The Washington took him in the first round. He's a first round talent. I don't have the draft in front of me. I don't remember if there were other offensive linemen that could have been there for them to take. But the whole point, Minnesota, they're struggling right now to protect Kirk Cousins, right? They pick a wide receiver in the first round. I'm not questioning any individual draft process. I'm just questioning the idea of, for many years, both of these franchises have struggled to keep their quarterback upright. You would think that they might overemphasize the offensive line the same way the Eagles do. And other teams, not just the Eagles, but the Eagles do it really well.
Well, that was the draft, Jeff, just for your own benefit, that Iguana was taken, Evan Neal was taken, Charles Cross was taken. They were all taken before Jahan Dotson.
Now, was there a guard at all in that area? Or
no?
No.
Now Cross is hurt right now, but he played reasonably well a year ago. Iguana and Evan Neal have struggled mightily. So again, just taking one doesn't automatically mean it works.
100%. That is true. Jason, I wanted to ask you this. As a wide receiver, when you would go into a game, and you didn't have too many games like this playing for Andy Reid, but when you knew that the line was an issue, maybe there were a lot of injuries, there were a couple of years where the line was hurt, right? And your quarterback was going to be under duress. What kind of mentality did you have to take into that game? If you're Jahan Dotson today, or you're Terry McLaurin, you're Sam Howell, and you know that you're facing this brutal front line and you've struggled to protect, is there anything you do mentally to prepare differently, or do you have to make sure your everything you do is more perfect than normal?
No, you gotta avoid being frustrated. That's the thing.
No, I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, you have to avoid, being frustrated, because nothing tells you that you're a secondary position like having a bad O-line and you're a receiver, right? Because you can kill a guy out there like, I am destroying this dude, can't get the ball. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're invisible. The offensive line can't protect it, right? So learning how to, keep your cool, realize that the quarterback is going through a lot in those situations and not add to his problems. Yeah, so I would say that's the biggest thing, is trying to, not to blow up on the sideline, because, if you fighting as a receiver, fighting with the offensive line, it's a losing property.
Yeah. Definitely.
You go out there as a receiver, like, come on, dude, do your job. You're going to get hit with a right hook.
Right.
Talking about some anger management. Most of those dudes that play up on the offensive line have anger management problems, for sure.
Certainly during the game.
Yeah, no, but that's a good point, right? I mean, Washington knows what it's up against, and they're going to have to keep their cool today. And like I mentioned earlier, for whatever reason, when the Eagles and Washington play each other, sometimes tempers flare. So we'll have to see how that manifests.
And if I could just play off one thing that Jay said, it just popped into my head, is the issue you face when you can't protect well is you have to then use more bodies, deploy more bodies in protection. It reminds me of looking this past week, because, as you guys know, I look at the entire league, not just the Eagles. I'm watching the Titans playing the Browns last week, and there were two plays on 3rd and long, and in which the Titans went with what we call 0-2 personnel, no backs, 2 tight ends, and 3 wide. They kept 2 tight ends to protect, just to deal with Garrett, And so essentially what happened is they had 3 wide receivers running routes, and the Browns played cover 2. So you had 3 wide receivers with 7 defensive backs, because you have to protect. Because if you can't protect, as Jay said, you have no pass game. But then the flip side of that is numbers. Football is a numbers game. When you get right down to it, then you've got 3 receivers versus 7 DBs. And as Jay can tell you, that's a little difficult to get open and feel good about your pass game.
Yeah, gotta have a great quarterback that's cutting it through people. But I don't know if I ever seen a more dominant performance than Myles Garrett against the Titans last week. Dude, they were
against our friend Andre Dillard.
Oh
yeah.
My God.
That Cleveland defense is legit. Yeah, they're really good.
But anyway, I was just trying to make that point, that to play off Jay, that it's all about protection, but then there's a flip side to that as well. Is the more bodies you have to deploy in protection, the fewer go out. You have to take eligible receivers away from running routes to put in protection. Then you have an issue as well. It's a different issue, but it's an issue.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Way,
Greg, the only way that works is if you're going down the field. Right. Because the further you go down the field, the less bodies you have. And hopefully you can get a one-on-one as you get further down.
As you get further, that's a great point. Great point.
Right. All right. Really interesting fun fact as we wrapped up hour one here. Obviously, the Eagles and Commanders, being division opponents, play each other twice a year. So they have played 10 times in the last 5 years. The Eagles have faced 8 different Commanders starting quarterbacks in those 10 games. And in each individual season from 2018 to 2022, they have faced a different starting quarterback from game 1 to game 2. If Sam Howell starts against the Eagles in 7 weeks, I think they play again. That'll be the first time in over 5 years that the Eagles are facing the same Commanders quarterback. It's actually just 4 weeks from now. That'll be the first time that the Eagles face the same Commanders starting quarterback in the same year in over 5 years. Adam, is that not incomprehensible just to hear?
It's another thing. It's offensive line protection, their inability to develop offensive linemen. You can go back several years. It's not just any particular draft. It's several years. And then just the revolving door at quarterback has been pathetic. I mean, they missed completely on Wentz. Taylor Heineke was a great story. And development came out of nowhere, literally off the couch. He was going to be a teacher. I mean, Gail Gilbert's son, Garrett Gilbert, remember that 2 years ago? Greg and I grew up watching Gail Gilbert.
Yeah.
Quarterback. And then Haskins and Case Keenum and Mark Sanchez. You just go look at all these quarterbacks, Jeff. This is ridiculously bad. They just keep making mistakes. Now, if you look at their schedule coming up, they do play the Bears next week, the NFL's worst team, then Atlanta, who's beatable, then the Giants. So I would think Howell's going to have it for a while. And they really do. Talking to the Commanders, they really like Sam Howell. They like his aggressiveness. He's a pretty smart kid. He's pretty accountable. He's very coachable, which you like. That's really big with coaches. If you're willing to be criticized and look at the tape and improve, you got a chance.
Definitely. All right, we're going to pause real quick as we wrap up hour one of Inside the Birds pregame live here to hear a word from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
All right, welcome back to hour two of Inside the Birds pregame live. Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan, joined, of course, as always, by Jason Avant and Greg Cosell. The Eagles are 9.5-point favorites last I checked today against the Commanders with the over-under of, has that changed? I thought it was 45.5, but that may have also changed. I will give a double check on that in a minute. So, what do you guys in general, I want to ask, this is a theme I'm kind of trying to stick on this year or this show, is what obviously a team never wants to kind of admit, yeah, we're undermanned or yeah, we're up against it. But when you've seen what the Eagles have done and what the Washington's come off of, do the coaches sort of spend an extra time trying to figure out things that they haven't done yet, that they can, like the unexpected, the unscouted looks? Do you think Washington spends an extra amount of time this week really getting into the weeds?
Washington worrying about what the Eagles are doing?
Well, sort of like, how can we move the ball effectively the way we want to against this team without just doing what we normally do? Do you have to go outside your boundaries a little bit?
You're always going to have your base game plan. That's like, those are plays that that you run no matter what. Mm-hmm. And the other plays is just timing. And that's the part about it. Like, there's good plays. This is about timing. First of all, can I protect? And then can I hit the Eagles in a coverage that I like for a big play or whatever? Yes, but do coordinators know that they're outmanned? Yeah, they do, because they say scary stuff to the players, and they don't come. It comes across in a way. They'll say stuff like, "This week, guys, we got to play a perfect game." Like, what does that mean? No one can play a perfect game,
right?
But they'll say stuff like that. And the honors coaches will say, "Hey, listen, we're not good enough to make those types of mistakes." That may be the worst thing you can hear as a player. But yeah, like an NFL talent. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds. This is not Wagner playing against Alabama.
True.
This is NFL talent. The Eagles are a better football team talent-wise, but the gap isn't that great. So let's not get it confused, is that the Washington Commanders have NFL talent that's able and willing. They can beat you at any given time. So now it's all about the offensive coordinator timing up his play calls and hitting them when the opportunity is there.
Gotcha. Excellent stuff. All right. Well, I want to go back real quick to Monday night as the Eagles beat the Buccaneers on the road. Eagles coach Nick Sirianni has the best road record in the regular season since he became the Eagles head coach in 2021, 15-4 on the road. And as we parlay that to Jalen Hurts, 10 consecutive road wins that Jalen Hurts has started going back to the second half of the 2021 season. I think his last road loss was that November 28th 3-interception game against the Giants. So, Adam, we really don't discuss. I know this is a home game for the Eagles today, but just in general, to have accomplishments like that so early in their tenures, we don't really discuss how impressive that is compared to what the NFL average is for winning road games or for young coaches to win. And
usually when a new staff comes in, they're better on at home than they are on the road. It's just usually the way it is. I just remember, look, they hammered Atlanta their first game ever, 2 years ago. They got off to a really good start. And they're just in the coaching profession, they talk about the portable game plan. It travels well. You have the same game plan. They have the same theme and an identity, whether they're home or away. And the thing that has been so impressive is, Geoff, with all the coaching changes they've had, both coordinators gone, position changes, positional coach changes, guys moving on, guys getting promoted, they're not missing a beat. And Sirianni is such a good leader, Geoff. Remember one of the first nuggets we heard on him about the connection stuff? That stuff matters. I know you can't really measure it, but the buy-in factor, Geoff, that these players have with this head coach, it's pretty remarkable. And we've said this before, and it's important to note. I don't know what it is about Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, particularly Lurie, but if you go back to Andy Reid, 3 out of the last 4 head coaches never had another head coaching interview, Geoff. Think about how incredible it is. And one of them won a Super Bowl, Peterson. Andy's now going to be a Hall of Fame coach, and this guy's already gotten to a Super Bowl. Pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's right. Jay, as a former player, I mean, you know how hard it is to go on the road, prepare on the road, play on the road. So do you have some kind of appreciation for what the Eagles have been able to do the last few years with a new head coach and quarterback?
Yeah, it's pretty tough. It talks about their mentality. I don't know what's talked about and what the coach is saying in the meetings in order to get that type of result and what the preparation is like. But someone needs to do a documentary on that if it continues to happen, because it doesn't happen, often in this manner. So there has to be something that they're doing that's giving them an edge. And I'll give it to, Nick Sirianni and something that they're doing. I don't think it's happenstance. I just think that it's some lucky charm that they have is working.
Definitely. Adam, a question that we got from the commenters that I want to throw to you. It's from Michael H. Will. He says, with Mann getting signed to the active roster, most likely after his elevations are up, who do they cut to make room for him if they do? And do they sign another punter to the practice squad, which is interesting because you brought up how they worked one out. I mean, do you think this is just a 3-week trial for Mann? I can't imagine that would be the case.
Their plan, as we noted when we reported that they were going to sign him, is that after 3 weeks, unless he just struggles. Now, he only had 1 punt last week, so we've got to see how he does the next 2 games. But unless he struggles, they're going to sign him off the practice squad to either a 1 or 2 year deal. Now, who would get cut? It's a good question. If you look at it's always the back end of the roster. Well, I'm not saying they're going to do this because they have a little bit of guaranteed money invested, but Rashad Penny has absolutely no role with this football team. So that would be a guy to take a look at. We'll see what happens. We're not saying they're going to do it, but talking about who would make sense. This craziness of the 7 defensive tackles, Geoff, on the roster. Now, they want to see Moro Jomo. They don't want to cut him. They want to see him develop. But again, do you need that?
Right. 4 tight ends. I don't think they want to. I don't think they want to move on from any. But I mean, they're going to have to make room.
It's a great question. We're going to address this later. In a couple weeks. It's a great question, Mike. We'll look at it down the road. To me, Rashad Penny, because look, Gainwell, Swift, and Scott's the third. He's, as Jeff likes to joke, whenever they spin the wheel in the Giants, that's when he gets used. That's when he gets usage. But he's also he's not going anywhere. He's the third back and a kickoff returner. So those are the guys that make sense. Other than that, Patrick Johnson, important special teams. They like keeping him.
Yep.
Pretty much it.
Yeah. Also, the unanswerable answer is that injuries have played a role in here. If someone has to go on IR, that creates a spot to open, like when Nakobe Dean got injured and then they signed Nick Morrow off the practice squad. So we'll have to see there. Hopefully that's not the case for the Eagles, but you never know. As far as scores, Carl Stevenson says the Birds win 27-13. We got Michael H., who says 31-17. He predicts Jalen Carter with a sack and Devontae Smith with a touchdown. Commanders 10, Eagles 45, according to Emily Bentley. And Jeremy Glasser says 35-13 Eagles. So we got a lot of big Eagles crooked scores going on so far. Mm-hmm. All right, before we get back into the X's and O's, I want to tell everybody about our friends at MyBookie. You got to make your money work smarter, not harder, with MyBookie. Celebrate your winning season with MyBookie's biggest offer, up to $200 cash bonus on your first deposit. That's right, an up to $200 cash bonus on your first deposit before you even place a bet by making a deposit with MyBookie. All you have to do is go to mybookie.ag and use the promo code THEBIRDS, one word, THEBIRDS, to claim this bonus. But make sure to act quickly because the offer is only available this week and you can only get it using the promo code THEBIRDS. Guys, this is easy for you right there. Promo code THEBIRDS at mybookie.ag, up to $200 cash bonus with a full slate of NFL and college football. There's plenty of options to bet and win. Don't be that guy who missed out. Bet anything, anytime, from anywhere, only with MyBookie. All right. Well, Michigan, as we mentioned
Penn
before,
State coming up here soon here. Michigan, Penn State coming up here soon here, Jeff.
Oh, we're going to have to get a little friendly wager this time.
When is it? When is that game?
Well, that game is in 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
Cool. Well, maybe a little bit further out.
Oh, no, you're right. We got Ohio State first. So, yeah, this time it might be Jason who has to sing Penn State's song instead of me doing the opposite during the show, which happened last year, which I think I deleted so that nobody else can ever see it again. Zach, it's up. It's the internet. It's forever. I know. Back to the Eagles. All Jalen Hurts does is win, as we mentioned, even when he's not at his best. Through 3 weeks, I think it's all fair of us to say that Hurts is still looking to regain that 2022 form. His completion percentage, 68%, really good, but he's got just 3 passing touchdowns. He's been sacked 8 times. He's thrown 3 picks already. A surprisingly low 84.5 passer rating for him. So, Greg, there are a couple things I'll say I noticed, and you tell me if you agree or disagree just watching the tape against Tampa. Left the pocket a few times early, which remind me of the Jalen Hurts from a couple of years ago when you sense the pressure and it's not really there. Don't necessarily know that he kept his eyes down or up the field when he did leave that. And a little late on some throws. What else? What have you observed about Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I would say that he's struggling a bit right now in seeing and processing what he needs to. There were snaps in which he dropped his eyes when he didn't get a clear picture on his primary read. I think you'll see defenses start to bring a little second level pressure to get him to react and to bring his eyes down because they're seeing that as well on tape. He missed a few too many routine throws that he has to make. You can't miss the layups in this league. So he missed a few too many of those. But your point about him being a little, prematurely leaving the pocket, is correct. He was a little too quick to break down. He showed a tendency, as I said, to drop his eyes. He was too aware of the pass rush. You can't be aware of the pass rush as a quarterback. He needs to settle down. He needs to work more effectively from the pocket. We saw him do these things more a year ago. We'll see as the season goes forward. It's something I thought about this week, and I talked to a number of people, actually. It's a really interesting conversation, and Jay can speak about Hurts as well. But when you can win as a team when your quarterback doesn't play well, because the team is not necessarily built around the quarterback per se. And then there's other teams where if the quarterback doesn't play well because the team is really built around them, they lose. it changes the perception of the way people think about a quarterback. Because if a team that's built, no quarterback can play phenomenal football for 17 games. It's the NFL. It just doesn't happen that way. Okay.
Right.
So when those teams lose, everybody rips the quarterback. But when a team can win without the quarterback playing at a high level, most people assume they still win because of the quarterback, because the quarterback's the number one position on the field. So it's just a conversation that I've had with different people, but it's just the way it's seen, out there in the world. When a team wins, it's because of the quarterback.
Right.
Whether it's true or not.
Whether it's true or not. And same thing with losing. Jay, couple of things I want to get through with Jalen. First, Andy Reid's one of his favorite expressions, just a hair off. And it does look like at times with some of his throws, I think he missed Zacchaeus for a touchdown maybe in the red zone, because the red zone offense has obviously was not great against Tampa. Are you seeing him just like a little bit off?
That was a catchable ball, by the way.
Which one?
The one is Zacchaeus that went off his face mask. It was a tough throw, catch, but it was catchable. And yes, Jalen could have got that ball further out in front of him.
Right.
That could have happened, but it still was a catchable ball.
Okay.
So I'll say this. I'll chalk up the one that he threw to the running back, miscommunication. I think the running back was correct. Just
talking about the interception.
Yes.
Yeah. To DeAndre
again,
Swift,
not interrupt you, Jay, but that just looked like an angle route to me, and I don't know where Jalen was throwing that ball.
Exactly. Right. So it was either on that route in zone you can sit it or against what let me say that. Let me say it the right way. In cover 2, you can sit it, and if it's single safety or you got that in break, nobody's in there, you can go in on the angle, right? So he chose the angle, and it was decisive. It was no hesitation. So no matter what, Jalen should have been able to pick up on his body language, because he did a good job of giving a clear stick. It was defined to be able to throw that ball in there. All right. So let's say that was a miscommunication. That was an anomaly. He threw a pass that was flabbergasted me right at the end of halftime. I mean, the first half, threw the ball inbounds, short of the goal line. The dude could have picked it off. Was it Delaney?
Yeah.
He could have picked it off. That was a horrible decision. That could have been another interception. Right. So the 1-2 Lamine Zacchaeus, the touchdown, I would say 75% of the time that ball is going to get picked. Great throw because it worked. What I'm saying is to hold the ball that long in the pocket when guys are bearing down on you. It's the same thing that Sam Howell's doing on tape. His didn't work, but he held it really long. He got hit. If the guy gets there a split second, the ball flutters. It's just a clear pick. Right. So you looking at that, he leaves the game with four interceptions. Right. So I would just say that he's pressing a little bit to get the ball down the field. And that's when you have a guy that like AJ or whoever else on the sideline, you explode, the guy's trying to get the ball down, trying to make guys happy, trying to accommodate everyone. I just think that he just needs to take what the defense gives him.
Okay. So my natural follow-up, and I think you're the only one that can answer that out of all three, is because you've been in the locker room, you've played with players who have been quarterbacks or other players who have signed huge contracts, right? And then felt that pressure of living up to a contract. Could that be in your mind? And I know you're not like next to Jalen Hurts every day, but have you seen that before? A player signs a big contract that you played with and you could tell he was a little tight or trying a little too hard to be everything.
We talked about this. Was this on the Q&A podcast? And I don't know if I ever put it out there like this, but I think I did. Just think about this. Jordan, all of the massive attention that he's gotten, Sports Illustrated, Essence Magazine, he's on every commercial now, him and freaking Fitzpatrick, right? They're on a lot of TV commercials. There's a lot of pressure. You go from having, mom and dad and my agent in the phone to having Jay-Z and Barack Obama and whoever whatever else in your phone. There's a lot of notoriety, a lot of attention. You're the golden boy of Philadelphia. Everyone is singing your praise. That takes an adjustment. And then I have guys that are next to me that are getting paid a lot of money that want to make the Pro Bowl as well and want to win the Super Bowl. That's a lot of pressure. And it's going to take some time for Jalen to adjust to his newfound success.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not he has the character to be able to do it, but there is a learning curve when it comes to this expectation. Right. He's been an underdog his whole life. How do you deal when you are the person out in front?
Sure.
Do I think that those are things that he's dealing with? I do think those are things that he's dealing with. Do I think that's the reason that he's not playing bad, but he's not playing up to the standard that he set for himself and what he did last year.
Right. Good stuff. As it pertains to today's game, he is going up against a defense that he'll be at least the defensive coordinator and a lot of the personnel that he's pretty familiar with, having been the starting quarterback for the Eagles last few years now and playing Washington twice a year. You think about how he saw Bill Belichick for the first time and Brian Flores for the first time. And, obviously Todd Bowles he's seen before, but it had been since that playoff game. Greg, give me a sense of what is Del Rio basically just doing what he normally does with this Washington defense? Have you seen anything different? Because the personnel that Jalen is going to be seeing for the most part up front is the same. There are a couple of new guys on the back end, but how about the scheme?
Yeah, well, they're a team that they're playing a lot of split safety on the back end. They're not really a single high safety defense. They're playing a lot of split safety. They featured a good amount of cover 2. They featured a good amount of cover 4 with all its variations, which is, quarter, half, all those things that come with playing cover 4. So he's going to see a lot of that. They play a lot, as we've discussed before, they play a lot of big nickel. That's kind of a foundational defense for them. But then when they do play their regular nickel, what they do is they bring St. Just, who starts on the outside. They bring St. Just, who's long and athletic inside, and Fuller and the rookie Forbes are the outside corners. The rookie Forbes does not play in their base big nickel. It's St. Just and Fuller playing on the outside. Their linebackers are Davis and Barton. Barton is an interesting player. He was with Seattle the last couple of years, and he's actually a pretty active, pretty solid player. Davis is still not quite the impact player that I think they hoped when they drafted him, given his size, his length, and his athletic movement. I'm sure they felt he'd be an impact kind of player. He's not. The D-line, which is really the foundation of everything they do, has not played great football through the first 3 weeks. Now, because they're good players and have strong track records in this league, can they step up and be great any given week? Sure, they could, but they have not played great football through the first 3 weeks.
Yeah. That Adam, how much? Go ahead. Do you have inactives?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Ooh, a surprise here. Watkins, we knew would be inactive. Tanner McKee, Sidney Brown, Rashad Penny, we expected is inactive. But here's the big one: Justin Evans, surprisingly inactive. So Jeff,
wow,
they only will dress 3 safeties. McCollum's the 3rd safety. So. And Tyler Steen and Ojomo. So they will dress 6 D tackles.
So they won't be playing a lot of big nickel today.
No.
Yeah, exactly. No. Right. Exactly. So Jeff, that's problematic.
It's a lot of small nickel.
Interested. Yeah, small nickel. I'm so interested to see what Eric Bieniemy does, knowing that he sees that they get the inactives as well, knowing that Evans isn't starting, what they're going to do, how they're going to spread them out.
Can you use Nick Morrow, a converted safety, in sort of a slot against tight ends type matchup, or is that just no? I'm just trying to throw something against the wall here to see.
No.
So you got to go live and die with Tristan McCollum here, I guess. I don't know what. Or James Bradbury in the slot.
Hey, that's classic. You see Greg's face.
Greg was like, no.
In other words, that's a horrible idea.
It is a horrible idea. I admit, I'm just trying to figure out what the defensive staff could be thinking here about what they're going to do.
Hey, Jeff, this goes on your point earlier. They have to add a veteran safety at some point. They just, by numbers, you could put the guy in the practice squad and activate him on game day. You move him up. But man, this is not good. This changes the way you play defense. So right now, It's Blankenship and Edmonds are your starters, of course. It's the last man over, the guys that are leftovers. McCollum's the 3. They'll be good enough at corner, but it does impact, Geoff, formationally and tactically what you can do.
Well, I mean, like to Jay's point, maybe it's also why aren't you looking at veteran nickel corners? Because now James Bradbury, I think we all have to assume, will be the full-time
Has to for now
slot cornerback today. I mean, I don't know any other way around it.
It's not his best use.
Right.
And remember the acquisitions we had in the season last year. We had Sue and we had Linval Joseph. That may be for corners this year.
Right.
And those guys play well. So corners or defensive backs this year, so we may need that. And we probably have to look and see who's available out there and get somebody that still can run and likes to be physical.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Obviously something to watch today. We were talking about Washington's defense before that. And Adam, we've been saying this for like 2 years now, ever since when Washington won the division 3 years ago, because of the strength of that defensive line and that defense, and they won it with a losing record, I believe. But that 4-man line of all number 1 picks has just not, as Greg just alluded to, you would think that they would be dominating the league, and they just don't, for whatever reason.
Payne's great, and I know Sweat's playing better this year, but he's not really lived up to it. That's why he didn't get an extension.
Yeah.
Chase Young is the guy that's been in and out of the lineup due to injuries, neck, ACL. You worry about the Jamin Davis is, they're hoping this will be his takeoff year because he was drafted to be able to cover because he's long. They have good depth at corner. Quan Martin's back. They eventually talking to them. They want him to be their nickel, but he's got a ways to go here. Manuel Forbes. Here's the guy, right? If you're the Eagles, when he's out in the field, Geoff, you're gonna somehow want to get AJ Brown with his muscle against Forbes, who I'm told weighed in when he was after the draft when they had to take his physical 166.
Yeah, 166 is what I was told.
Well, that's what he weighed at the combine.
Same thing.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
But the thing that he does have is excellent ball skills. Yes, excellent ball skills. And Greg, I want to get your opinion on this. When it comes to Sweat,
Montez Sweat?
Yeah,
Sweat.
That's right. They're 2 Sweats here. Yeah.
Wasn't a guy that was considered a first-round pick, but he set the combine on fire.
Correct.
This just is one of those examples is that, man, you can look good in shorts. Doesn't mean that just because you're a first-round pick that is going to, pan out that way.
Hey, Jay, I used to look good in shorts a long time ago, too,
You did?
I don't believe that for a second.
Really? When you're playing hoops.
I believe you, Greg.
Montez Sweat was not a dominant college player.
Right.
He was a good college player, but he blew up the combine, and everybody saw his size and his movement. And you know how coaches think, Jay, and scouts in particular. I mean, you know how scouts think, and that's why there's always a battle between scouts and coaches, because scouts always take the view that, hey, if a guy has unbelievable measurables and he's a great athlete for his position, that, hey, now it's up to the coaches to make him a great player. And if he doesn't become a great player, and Adam knows this, we talk to scouts all the time, then the scouts think the coaches are doing a bad job. That's the way.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But I would say that he has moments, but if you're talking about, is he a really good player on a play after play, week to week basis, I think he would fall short of that designation for sure. And Chase Young has been hurt so much now. The last 2 weeks, he's played about 50 snaps each, and they're counting on him to be Chase Young because he does have traits. Young does have high-level traits. He just has not been able to display them because he has not been able to be on the field. And, and of course, that's a problem. But, I think Payne and Allen are really solid players, but I think at the end position, they just haven't been anywhere near as good as everybody expects because of the players' names.
Right. Right. And so, to Adam's point, you have a matchup here, AJ Brown, a big, strong guy against a 166-pound corner who does play strong. I mean, he did in college in
but he only plays in the nickel.
Right. Only plays in the nickel. Last year, Jalen Hurts had a huge game against Washington in that first matchup, 340 yards, 3 touchdown passes, 123.5 rating. If you guys remember, Devontae Smith went off in that game. He had 8 catches, 169 yards, and a touchdown. But I don't remember, Greg, if they were more of if what you said about them being a 2-high team, a split safety team, is that a change from what they were doing last year? Is this more too high than normal? Or is
They
that
made
just
a
normal?
change last year, kind of in the middle of the season, to move in this direction, if memory serves me correctly.
Right.
Correct. You are correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
I remember that too. Yeah.
So I mean, they've been doing that since the middle of last season. They started off playing a lot more man last year, and obviously the coaching staff didn't feel that it was working the way it needs to work, and they started to make a change. And you know, that's what they've sort of become now. They play a lot more split safety.
They're playing match coverage, right, Greg? That's what Del Rio
Yeah,
said.
I mean, all that split, you know, Jay could speak to this too. All that split safety stuff, zone, in the way it works in the NFL now, is it all is pattern matching and match principles.
Yep.
It's not zone back in the mid-90s, you know, where somebody runs to a landmark and stands there. You know, it's a lot of match, carry, deliver, pattern matching. It's teams, even if it's zone founded, it has more man principles to it. I mean, you could make the argument that quarters coverage, straight quarters, is just man with rules. You know, I mean, eventually you got to match up somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And there are times when you're watching, right, where, I mean, if someone who's not as experienced watches it, you might be confused. You might be seeing sort of like what looks like man coverage on one side of the field and zone coverage on the other side within those schemes that you're watching on tape.
Oh, you
right?
see that a lot now too in the league. There's a lot more combination coverages. You know, sometimes these split safety coverages can be totally different. Some are purely split safety, where literally the field is split in half and each side is totally separate. Right. Then there's other split safety where that's not the case at all, where there's carryover, you know, an overlap depending on route. So there's coverage has really sort of evolved and expanded, just because there's a lot more routes, you know, with you know, whether it's 2x2 sets or 3x1 sets, it's constantly changing. It's constantly evolving.
Of course. All right. Speaking of evolving, since week one, the Eagles run offense, right? With DeAndre Swift leading the way. Last week, we talked, Greg and Jason Adam, about just play calling, about having a feel for when to call the right plays against the right coverages. And there was a play Monday night. I think Greg and Clay spoke about it on Inside the Tape on the Inside the Birds platform.
We did.
Right. And it jumped out to me, too. I had it written in my notebooks where they ran an inside zone. And at the mesh point, it looks like Tampa Bay is actually morphing into some type of Tampa 2 or cover 2, and all the linebackers are dropping back as DeAndre Swift is taking the ball, and then he just has the ability then to run straight up the middle, I think for 13, 14 yards, almost untouched. And I wonder, Greg, if that's sort of...
It was the first play of the second possession. He ran 14 yards.
Right, so, right.
And this is the kind of thing I always wonder when I watch tape, because sometimes when you watch tape, you see a play call, and you just say, God, did they know what the defense was going to be 100%? Because it just was the perfect play call to beat that. You know, normally I think about that more in the pass game, but this was true in the run game. It was the first play of the second possession, and they caught the Bucs in disguised late rotation to cover 2 invert. So the 3 stacked defenders all were sinking at the snap. And the Eagles had a fold block by Kelsey, and Kelsey literally had no one to block because the 3 stacked players were retreating because it was a cover 2 play call. And Swift, I don't think he got touched till he got tackled, and he ran for 14 yards. And I thought to myself watching that, gee, did Brian Johnson really, you know, and again, it's all tendency and probability, but did he feel really strongly that that's what he was going to get? Or was that just one of those things and it worked out perfectly?
Right. And I couldn't tell if that illustrated our conversation about him having a really good feel for play calling, and people don't get enough credit when your play calling is good run plays as opposed to good pass plays. But Jay, it just seemed like he was a step ahead on a lot of the calls.
Remember how this works, right? So upstairs, there's a scouting department and the stat department that's counting all the snaps that's happening at the beginning of the game. And they're breaking it down into probabilities. That's what they do. And they give you the report. They bring it downstairs and tell you, hey, they're playing cover 2 invert on this particular down in this situation, this part of the field, based on what's happened earlier in this game. And so now you go to your Rolodex as a coach and say, okay, these are my plays for that. Mm-hmm. And if I hit them, I hit them. If I don't, they switch it up. I can't. But and it may have been one of those moments where he hit it because of information. It could have been happenstance, But
Right.
it's a lot of times you hit those plays because of the information that you've compiled before then.
Yeah, and I just think there has to be. Tampa Bay is a good defense. They came in as a good defense. They have good front six personnel, but there were times where the Eagles just owned them on certain runs to the point where it wasn't just great blocking. There were just wide open lanes for DeAndre Swift to run through, and that to me has to symbolize some kind of good mind game going on with Brian Johnson there.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff there. We're going to talk about that running game a little more in a second. First, I want to pause so we can hear a word from our friends from Sky Motor Cars and the voice of the Eagles, Mr. Merrill Reese.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, if you happen to stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. We were talking about the run game for the Eagles just clicking, so there would be no reason to abandon it today. Since the start of week 2, DeAndre Swift has 305 rushing yards. That is tops in the NFL. In fact, he's so far ahead. The number 2 guy, James Cook of the Bills, is at 221 yards. So he's almost 100 yards higher than number 2. Zach Moss. This is an interesting names, by the way, the last few weeks. Zach Moss, 3rd at 210. Devin Achane. We thought it was Achane. We corrected it nationally. It's Achane of the Miami Dolphins, the rookie, with 208 yards, and James Conner with 204. Now, of those 5 running backs, only Achane has a higher yards per carry average than Swift at 6.9. So what's crazy to me, it's fascinating, Adam, is we've discussed this play calling and having a feel for the game. The Eagles, now we see, have a good feel for this rotation, right? And we have DeAndre Swift, who I believe got most of the carries in the second and third quarter on first down. And then when they built that lead, you coined the name. He's now Kenneth Grindwell instead of Gainwell, right? He's the Grindwell back.
They did a great job. Remember, we said before the game in our pregame show last week at this time, we said, look, if they get a lead in the fourth quarter, pull Swift out. We knew Swift was going to be the lead back. But they'd rotate, as you talked about. But if they get the lead, get Swift out. Get him out of the game. Don't expose him to any more hits.
Right.
He's had shoulder problems in his career, knee injuries, whatever the case may be. Get him out. Let grind carries. It could not have worked out better from the coaches. Now you've got Scott back. Boston Scott's back from his concussion. He's active today. So they've got this going on here. This is worked out. Because, Geoff, remember the first game, you and I particularly said, I don't know what they're doing here. This is ridiculous, not getting Swift involved. That was a mistake. And they had to correct the mistake, but obviously Gainwell got hurt. So then Swift was great. He's now clearly the lead guy, but they have a rotation and it works. I cannot say anything other than they did a great job. And Jamal Singleton, who's a really good running backs coach, they did a great job with the rotation. They did such a smart thing, getting Swift out of the game. Once it worked like it did, you got Gainwell for that specific role to grind carries when you need him to.
Yeah, which is not a role that I think any of us ever anticipated when he came out of college a couple of years ago out of Memphis.
Geoff, can I just say one thing?
You may.
We live in a world and in the NFL of quote unquote, it's a passing league. I give Brian Johnson a ton of credit here because, he sees what works in these, and again, it's 3 games, but he sees Minnesota, the Bucks, and don't forget, there's a domino effect of running the football. It's not just, he's running the football and that's great. It also means that your defense is going to play fewer snaps, and that's really important. I mean, I know the Eagles have a really deep D-line rotation and a great D-line rotation, but it never hurts for those big guys to play fewer snaps. They stay fresh. They rush the quarterback. They can do more things over the course of a game. And the other part of that, which is really, really important, and I know Jay can certainly speak to this, is it allows you to control the pace and tempo of the game. And there's and that might seem like an intangible thing, that you can't necessarily quantify, but it's not really. It's really a tangible thing when you're controlling how the game is being played. And I think that's to me and again, every game's going to be different. I don't know how today's game is going to play out. Maybe the Commanders are not the team where the Eagles have to change anything dramatically. But we know what their schedule is going to be down the road, and they're not going to be able to play like this every single game. But the point is to win the games, and this is the best way to win these games. And instead of sticking to a philosophy, we have to do this because this is who we are. He's doing, in my view anyway, the right thing, and they're winning these games.
Yeah, Jay, you can speak to that because Tampa Bay. I mean, that's a prideful bunch. They got good players up front. From Vea to Tryon to Shaq Barrett, right? I mean, they're known for having a good front seven. And I've probably at some point, you as a player probably sensed that they were probably annoyed and maybe demoralized by how easily the Eagles were able to run on them.
No, the Eagles offensive line and play calling literally made a very good veteran group look very average for a day. And I don't think that'll happen every single time, but when you can take advantage of it and you have a good scheme, you continue to go to the well. And remember, the game is about wins.
Yep.
It's not about stats. It's not about accomplishment. It's not about that stuff. And that's why I was getting annoyed late in that game, because we were throwing the ball unnecessarily. We just 100%. We were. And it seemed, like I said, that's why I said either we were practicing or we were trying to appease. That was it. There's only two things. Either we were practicing, trying to get Jalen's timing down, or we were trying to appease. And if we were trying to appease, it's an avalanche that can never be stopped, because there's more than A.J. Brown. There's Devontae Smith. There's Dallas Goedert. There's a bunch of guys that want to touch the ball. And guess what? It's only one football, and everybody.
Right. And of course, A.J. Brown had 14 targets in that game. That was much more than anybody else. And it came, as you mentioned, a week after he was upset on the sideline about it. There is also an unsung hero in this running game and success that we're going to get to in just a second. I want to stop right now just to thank our production team of James and Zach. They're back behind the wheels again. They bring Inside the Birds pregame live to you in high definition with new graphics, videos, and more. And we just want to thank them all for all their behind the scenes work and everything they do to bring this fantastic show to life, the graphics, the images, the flow, everything about it. So Zach and James, we thank you so much. Really appreciate everything that you do. You are our unsung heroes. And so as I segue to this topic of an unsung hero, we know Jeff Stoutland is the run game coordinator. We also know he's the offensive line coach, and he had a project this year with a new right guard. And I felt for the first time that Cam Jurgens really established himself in that game against Tampa Bay. He did allow an early pressure, and I thought it might wind up being a tough game for him. But then as it settled in, I thought he was one of the unsung heroes of the offensive line who doesn't get a whole lot of credit. Greg, did you notice Cam Jurgens on tape while you were watching that game?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it started on the first play of the game. He had an outstanding one-on-one block on the play side 3 technique, Mike Green. It was the 8-yard run by Swift. It was the first run of the game. I think overall he played well in the run game. Had a couple of pass pros where I thought he bent at the waist a little too much, and he's got to work on that. But for the most part in the run game, I thought he was pretty effective.
Jason, he's eventually going to move to center. And there was a big uncertainty around him. If Jason Kelce ever decides to retire one of these years, right? Cam Jurgens will probably be the center. That is not always the easiest transition, even though he did play 2 years of it at college. But in general, when you see what Jeff Stoutland has done with him, Jordan Mailata, I mean, it feels like the Eagles have a very good wild card advantage in having a guy like Stoutland.
Oh, let's go back before Mailata or Jurgens. Think about when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Jason Peters down.
Yep.
The Chiefs annihilating Big V and those guys early in the season, and how they turned it around. This dude is literally, to me, is the best position coach in the entire National Football League. And I don't think it's close when I say just position coaches. He has the most effect, and things don't get done in that building if he's not in agreement with it.
Right.
Because that's how much weight that he holds, and all the players respect him. He gives everyone respect. And all the coaching staff does. You should hear, and they should put that on the documentary. Jason Kelsey and Stoutland go at it over protections. And it's a thing of beauty. You would think that it's a dysfunctional relationship, right? But it's literally two guys that love to win, that are very, very great at what they do. And he's a damn good coach.
Yeah, no doubt. And Adam, how many teams do you think can just let a guy like Isaac Seumalo, even though he had his injury history, he's a good player, just walk, right? Just walk and be able to slide somebody else in. Goes back to our conversation before about overemphasizing in a good way the trenches and how that pays off for the Eagles more so than other teams.
They'll never not be,
sorry.
I was just gonna say they'll never not be deep on the offensive line. They can always turn to somebody else. It's remarkable. By the way, I love what John DiFilippo told us with our Patreon people, with our chalk talk with him this week. And I love coaches always do this because they look at the number first, not the name. He goes 51, really kicked ass, and he goes, I guess he looked it up. He goes, Cam Jurgens, and he explained from a coaching standpoint what he saw. And John said it when you work for the Eagles, you kind of know, it's kind of unspoken, they're really going to be good on the offensive line. It comes from scouting meetings, coaching meetings. And John also said, to echo Jason's point about Jeff Stoutland, John just thinks the world of Stout. He was only with the Eagles for 2 years. And John's worked with some Hall of Fame coaches in his career. He put him up in his top 3 of assistant coaches he's ever worked with.
What were you going to say, Greg?
I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. Now I can't remember. See,
Jeff Stoutland, good.
Here's what I was going to say. I was going to say good organizations draft 2-3 years ahead.
Yes.
So like they know that, a certain player, whether it's Seumalo, Kelsey, they know, again, so they draft knowing that they need to replace guys. They don't wait till that year to have to replace a player, and that's critical now because everybody knows you can't pay everybody. You can't pay everybody. It's not possible. So you have to draft a couple of years ahead and know that, hey, you have some guy sitting there who's waiting to play.
And basically, Tyler Steen is the Cam Jurgens of last year. He's going to have to sit and learn and get himself better at the position. And the Eagles have the luxury of allowing, he's a 3rd-round pick, and they have expectations for him. And by this time next year, he may be battling for either a tackle or guard spot. You never know if Jason Kelsey retires.
Well, if Kelsey retires, Steen could well be the right guard next year.
There you go. So being ahead of the pack, right. All right. Time to wrap this thing up and get to our predictions. We will start with our player of the game for this week. Let's go with Jason. Jason, who's going to be the player of the game?
Not that great of an offensive line the Commanders have. I'm going to go with Jalen Carter again. I think I picked the right guy a couple times this year. You guys got to go check the tape.
Yeah, I think you've done all right.
All right, but I think Jalen Carter will do really well. I think the more games that he plays, and more as his snaps get greater, more snaps. This kid is, he's a
beast
player for sure.
No doubt. Adam, I loved your player of the game selection. I think every Eagles fan has been waiting for this kind of a player of the game. Who's going to be?
Yeah, so it's the guy who finally we should mention. This is important. He got the cast off his right hand. That's Hassan Reddick, who he's gotten some pressures, but he's just not gotten sacks. So let's see how he does without that. Now, we'll see if he wears a wrap on that hand, but the bottom line is he'll have better stability, he'll have better leverage. And this is the offensive line to get it done against. The Washington offensive line is bad.
Yeah.
It's a bottom 5, bottom 3 offensive line. And I expect this D-line to eat tonight. And by the way, you might as well just put Jalen Carter in there every week. I mean, you're probably not going to be wrong. It's the default name, Jalen Carter.
Are you basically saying that Jason's taking the easy route? Jason just did a humble brag, like, oh, you should check the tape on
look,
who, and now you're saying, it's kind of an easy pick.
It is.
God.
Stud.
I love it.
Always a hater. It's always a tush push hater. It's always a tush push hater in there somewhere.
That's right. That's right.
What are they calling it now? What are they calling that? What's the
brotherly shove?
Brotherly shove. I like that. Yeah. Brotherly shove. Yeah.
By the way, Penn State tried that play yesterday about 5 times, except they don't have a quarterback who can squat 650, and they also tried it from like the 4-yard line. So I think they had to do it 2 times in a row to get Drew Heller in the end zone.
Oh my God.
It was kind of funny. Greg, who's the player of the game today?
Well, now I feel kind of stupid since
I set it up perfectly.
I mean, and I picked him for this game in particular because I just think that Washington's going to have to throw the ball. I think he's going to get more snaps, and I think that he's going to have a huge impact on this game.
Yeah, Jalen Carter. So 2 Jalen Carters and a Hassan Reddick kind of gives you the idea of how we think this game's going to go in the trenches. I went on offense. I think the hot hand is going to stay hot again today. I picked DeAndre Swift as my player of the game. It's easy for me to pick that too. When you guys see the holes that he has to run, it's like candy for a baby. He's never even touched in the first 5 or 6, yards of his carry half the time. It's crazy. So he will have another big day. All right. Again, Eagles 9.5-point home favorites today, over under a 43. Jason, you are 3-0, my friend. So who's going to win today?
I got the Birds winning, and I believe 27-21.5.
27-23.
23.
Over the total.
I'm getting older.
All right. So that's an over, by the way, but it's also a tighter game than maybe some people are thinking, which goes back to my point about Washington and Philadelphia games. They get to be like that. Greg, who do you got today?
Well, I have the Eagles. I can't remember my score, Jeff, but I know I picked the Eagles.
Yes,
maybe
30-17.
30-17, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the Eagles are going to win this game 30-17.
All right. So you said it, so it's going to happen. The Eagles cover and over. Adam, who do you have winning this game?
Shocker. I have the game going under. I have a 24-13. I just feel it's going to be hard. Yes, the Commandos are strong at the skill positions, but their problem is up front. They have trouble with pass protection. This D line is going to eat. They've got great energy. Their rotation's ridiculous. They're going to win. And by the way, finally we get good weather. It's beautiful out there. In fact, the whole country has good weather on Sunday, and the Eagles will be fine in this game. I don't see a letdown. I know some people are saying that. I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't either. Although, Adam, I did, for full disclosure, in the Inside the Birds podcast on Friday, I picked, I think, a 33-16 Eagles win. I have amended that a little bit, just putting more thought into it. I say now the Eagles win 26-16 because, again, Washington just has this weird way of mucking some things up. However, that's still an over, and that is still a cover. So that's a clean sweep for the Eagles, according to this panel. They will improve to 4-0 today if we are all right. Big thanks, of course, to Ocean Casino Resort, Sky Motor Cars, My Bookie, PHL Sports Nation, Splash Sports, James and Zach. Thanks to everybody for watching. Make sure you check out coverage of today's game immediately after, both on insidethebirds.com and the Inside the Birds post-game live show with myself, Adam, and former Eagles tight end Clay Harbor. That'll be available on all of our platforms, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you do catch your Inside the Birds viewing. And make sure, if you guys want, if you're in the area, I'll be at Hard Rock Cafe pretty soon, in about an hour, in Philadelphia, to have a little watch party for Eagles Commanders. So if you're in the area, I might buy you a drink. Come by, stop by, hang out with me. All right. Thanks again for everybody for watching. For Jason Avant, Greg Cosell, Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher, and you've been watching Inside the Birds pregame live.